welcome back to another episode of the K&L Sports Huddle. I'm Cage Kiplinger, your host, joined as always by my co-host Logan Hubert. Today we'll be breaking down another NFL division preview as we've been doing for the past several weeks. And then we'll give you a little Big Ten college football preview as well to finish things off with. But how are we doing today, Logan?
Doing well. After this past weekend, we can now say that there is not a weekend without football until February, after the Super Bowl, I believe.
Preseason action has already gotten underway. So let's get right into what missed the cut. First off, before we get to football, we did have some golf this past weekend, the first leg of the FedEx Cup playoffs, and we had a pretty good one as JJ Spawn and Justin Rose battled it out in what was a bit of a mini Ryder Cup situation for the FedEx St. Jude Championship. The first playoff hole on the 18th, they both lipped out on either side of the hole. The second time, they both birdied the hole. And then finally, the third time, Justin Rose came through with the victory, and he'll take home that trophy and move on. Both guys are going to be Ryder Cup locks, so pretty cool stuff seeing there as we get a little bit of a hint of what we're going to be seeing in September. Sports news is pretty slow when one of the bigger pieces of news is that the NFL banned teams from providing smelling salts for players, because really it's pointless because it's only that teams can't provide it. Players can bring it on their own and still use them. So I don't know what this really did for the league as far as banning this stuff from it, but a lot of funny clips we've been able to see from players using smelling salts just because of this topic. But as far as preseason football goes, we've had some injuries. We've had some standout performances. First off, Chargers left tackle. We just talked about him a couple weeks ago. I was raving about him and about this O-line for the Chargers, but Rashawn Slater will miss the entire season after suffering a torn patellar tendon. So big blow to the offensive line as well as Justin Herbert as he tries to navigate the AFC West this year. Colts QB Anthony Richardson, he exited a preseason game with a dislocated finger. We already thought there was going to be a QB battle between him and Daniel Jones. This might open the door for Jones to be the starting QB. We'll see what happens. We'll see how serious that is. Much more serious note, the Lions defensive back Maurice Morris was taken off the field in an ambulance in a preseason game versus the Falcons. That game suspended. So it was a pretty scary look for that game. He is doing well, and Dan Campbell was able to go in front of the mic and give us that news. But one standout performance is from the Cleveland Browns' Shadur Sanders. He impressed in his first preseason game, throwing 2 touchdowns, going 14 of 23 for 138 yards, and looks like to be the most talented QB in the room, at least. We'll see if he gets any playing time this year, but the injury to Kenny Pickett, the age of Joe Flacco, and we don't really know what's going on with Dylan Gabriel. We might get to see him this year. Any thoughts on our Miss the Cut before we move on?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm glad football's back, and it is fun to watch preseason if you go into it with the right mindset. But you're hurting for entertainment whenever there's all these takes that are coming from these preseason games when historically, other than injuries are big. If an injury happens in a preseason game, especially to a starter, that's big news. Or in practice, training camp for that matter too. Yep. People have reacted to training camps and preseason games. It's just all so pointless. Injuries are the only thing that really matter. If a guy looks terrible in preseason, that doesn't mean he's going to be terrible in the regular season. It could just be the design. It just could be the weapons he's dealt with, or they're just trying something new on offense, like just experiment. Or there's been history of guys who've dominated preseason and then come regular season, they're just huge draft busts, or just terrible fit for the team. So, yeah, there's hardly ever anything to make. That's how you should feel. Hardly anything to take from preseason games. Unfortunately, we live in a clickbait society where people fall for anything, but you can't really blame people because we're so hurting for football entertainment or really sports entertainment that you just kind of want to run with narratives.
Yeah. So we'll see if any of those have a big effect on their teams this season. But let's get into our next divisional preview. We are tackling the NFC North here, and the biggest storyline coming into this season will be Caleb Williams, but also Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn leaving Detroit, and also JJ McCarthy being the starting quarterback now for the Vikings. There's a lot of change in the NFC North. Give me your thoughts on just what you're thinking with this division coming into this season.
Tough division. Arguably had the three. How would I put this? So the top three teams in that division are arguably collectively the best top three in any division last year. The Bears kind of fell off after first few weeks. But if you recall, they all three just laid absolute duds in the playoffs. Packers you can give a little grace to because they went to Philadelphia, and Philadelphia was just a juggernaut last year. But Lions and Vikings were pretty pitiful in the postseason last year, despite their great regular season success. So, there's certainly a lot of talent in this division. A lot of question marks too with off-season moves. Lions have won this division 2 times in a row. They're looking for a three-peat, but there's a legitimate scenario where any of these 4 teams could win. Some longer shots than others, but you could make me believe that any 4 of these teams could win the division this year.
Yeah, it was pretty wide open this year. I think the Lions were so dominant last year, but the Vikings were obviously right there. Just a crazy run by Sam Darnold and the crew. But yeah, it's going to be different this season. I think any one of these 4 teams could take the division if they wanted to. But let's start with the first one we got here with the Chicago Bears. 2024 record of 5-12. They got Ben Johnson now. Lions offensive coordinator coming to Chicago to finally give this franchise an offensive-minded coach that could carry this team to multiple playoff runs. That's the dream for Chicago fans right now, and it's all up to Caleb Williams. He's got plenty of weapons now. He's got plenty of protection. They went out and they revamped the offensive line for this team, so he shouldn't be running for his life like he was last year. So it's kind of just up to him now. I almost look at last season for Caleb as a wasted year, really. He didn't get to really develop too much under Eberflus or Brown. It just wasn't. It was a wasted first year of his NFL career. But now that they have Ben Johnson, it'll be fascinating to see what he's able to do with Caleb. We've seen some, cherry picked clips of him in training camp, missing every ball in that little drill. It's like, okay, we're definitely harping on Caleb Williams just because of who he is and being the number 1 overall draft pick from last year. What do you think about Ben Johnson being the head coach of this team and what he can do for Caleb Williams and his development?
Yeah, the Bears are a big if team this year. Very frequently in these past several off seasons, I feel like they have been the off-season champions. Like last year was a great example of that. Like people had them marked in as a post-playoff team, and there really wasn't any indicator at all that was going to happen. And yeah, it obviously didn't happen. They started off somewhat decent, but then they lost 10 of their last 11 games. So yeah, like you said, in comes Ben Johnson, a guy who made the Detroit or contributed, or I don't know how much percentage he had in the involvement of the Detroit Lions offense. A pretty significant chunk of it, but yeah, he made them outstanding and fun to watch and elite. So yeah, question is, can he do that to a outdoor Chicago Bears team, cold Chicago Soldier Field team,
and where quarterbacks go to die?
Yeah, I would assume most Bears fans are aware of the 4,000-yard quarterback stat that no Bears quarterback has ever thrown for that many yards in a season. I mean, there's really not, barring injury, there's really not many excuses for Williams not to reach that level this year if Ben Johnson's as good of a coach as he is a coordinator.
Right.
Because I feel like he has the weapons. They addressed the weapons in the offseason. I mean, they drafted a tight end, which I didn't even think they needed, but they did with their 10th overall pick. So yeah, there's not many excuses to not have more success in Chicago this year, other than their division is tough, and I do think their strength of schedule is tough too. In fact, every team in the NFC North strength of schedule is very difficult. A lot of that is due to because you're playing each other twice, but they also play, as we mentioned last week, they play the NFC East, so that means you're playing the defending champions and Washington. And they also play the AFC North, so Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh. So, yeah, I mean, Chicago's on paper, I think they're way better than last year, mostly due to the coach that they have. Yeah, I mean, Ben Johnson already an upgrade over Eberflus, and Ben Johnson hasn't even coached a game yet. But, yeah, like they've been off-season champions many times in the past, and that hasn't resulted in much success. So I'm not going to declare anything bold for them this year yet.
Yeah, and we don't know what kind of identity this team's going to have. We've never seen Ben Johnson in a head coaching role, so he's always been the quiet offensive coordinator that just calls the plays, schemes up these very creative looks on offense. We don't know what he's going to be like as a leader for a whole team. Last year, Caleb, like I said, was running for his life. Despite being sacked 68 times, he still made 17 starts. He's looking to avoid a fifth straight season of, they're looking to avoid a fifth straight season of giving up at least 50 sacks. So the additions of All-Pro guard Joe Thuney, who they got from Kansas City, former Pro Bowl guard Jonah Jackson, and also Drew Dahlman, who PFF graded as the fourth best center in 2024. So they've definitely, like I said, revamped this offensive line. So he should have much better protection than he had last year, because it looked like he was just running for his life. They also, they did lose Keenan Allen in the offseason. He was their best receiver, but he cost a little too much for what he actually produced last season. He's getting up there in age. They did pick up Luther Burden III in the draft from Missouri. He gets to now be paired with DJ Moore, so a lot of speed on the outside. So some different looks that they can do, especially with Ben Johnson behind the call sheet. On defense, they ranked fifth in late October until a bunch of crushing defeats and key injuries happened for them. But one very interesting stat is that the Bears are the only franchise since 2019 that hasn't gone over on their win total. They've gone 0-5-1 since 2019, and they're the only team that hasn't. So if we're betting here, what's the line you're looking at?
Are you seeing 8.5?
I am.
Okay. One other thing about their defense is that, yeah, they finished, I believe, towards the bottom for sure. But the question is, was that because their offense was so poor and the defense was on the field too much, or was their defense actually not very good? So that'll also be a big question this year. I have them under because I have them at 8 wins. So that So anytime I say under or over, but it's just barely under or over, that usually indicates I'm not confident in the pick. So like I said, I'm not very confident in this pick, but I would go under just because I have them at 8 and 9, which is an improvement from last year. But I just think this division's too tough.
I think they'll improve, but I went a step further. I went down to 7.5. I went under on their 7.5. I got that at plus 115 for that. I think this team will improve. It'll just be marginally. It's the first season with a new head coach, and he's got to figure out how to be a head coach after being a coordinator for many years. So I think things are looking up with the Bears. They're not going to love this season because it's not going to be a playoff year, at least in my opinion, but they will improve slightly. I have them at 7 wins, so right below that 7.5. So that's where I'm looking at with the Bears. Let's move on to the Detroit Lions. They finished last season the league best 15-2 record, tied for league best. They, like you said, won back-to-back division championships, and this is for the first time in their history. They've been the lovable losers for so many years in this league, and now they finally have a core and a coach that have led them to a bunch of success recently. They did have a pretty crushing defeat to the Commanders in the playoffs last season that halted what was a great season and what was a great roster as well. They're the only team in the NFC to exist for all the Super Bowls and never make one. Are we feeling like they can finally make one this year?
Not out of the question. So everyone's been talking all offseason about the significance of the loss of coordinators, both offense and defensive. As we mentioned before, Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator last year, is now the head coach of the Chicago Bears, and their defensive coordinator from last year, Aaron Glenn, is now the head coach of the New York Jets. Something tells me this team's probably tired of hearing about that. So I could, the culture that Dan Campbell's ministered there, I think they could use that as fuel and still be almost as dominant as last year. I think last year might have been the peak because it's hard to regular season wise.
Right.
It's hard to top what they did last year. 15-2, undefeated in the NFC North, undefeated on the road, which is incredible. So yeah, this I still think this team's really good. Like I said, it was a pretty embarrassing loss in the playoffs last year. Their defense finally got exposed after all their injuries. It finally caught up to them by that point. Yeah. So I think their defense will be better than it was now than it was in the playoffs last year because you get guys like Aiden Hutchinson back and a few their linebacker core back. So yeah, like I said, I still think they're going to be really good. Still got all kinds of weapons with St. Brown as your wide receiver one, and then arguably the best running back duo in the game with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. So yeah, the question might be, will Jared Goff take a step back? Because he got off to a slow start with Sean McVay, but then he caught fire. Then he finally changed systems, went to Detroit, got off to a cold start there, but then he caught fire again. Well, now he has the same head coach, but he lost his offensive coordinator. So the question is, will he regress? Because he was really good last year.
Yeah.
Had one of his best seasons of his career. Will he regress, or will we see the same Jared Goff, and this team will still be one of the teams to beat in the NFC?
I definitely think he'll regress. I mean, how much it remains to be seen, but when you lose someone, an offensive mind like Ben Johnson, you're gonna see a regression, and especially with the season that he put up. That's not a normal season for Jared Goff. That was probably I would say his best season, one that would have probably got him some MVP votes for that. The personnel is still good here. You mentioned this is a really good roster. They're getting Aiden Hutchinson back, which is huge for their defensive line. My question would be: will Dan Campbell be able to rein in the super aggressive decision making that he had throughout the season last year? Will he rein that in now that he doesn't have his brilliant coordinators to fall back on? Went forward on a lot of fourth downs, made a lot of super aggressive decision making throughout the season that could have been costly. Granted, they still finished 15-2, but just want to see what that's going to look like with Dan Campbell, if he's going to be able to rein that in a little bit. They do return 10 starters on offense that finished top 5 each of the last 3 seasons. Possibly like you said, the best backfield in football. I love the Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery tandem. You got the power back, you got the speed back. And they won a league best 15 games last season despite losing players for combined 254 games due to injuries. That was tops in the NFL. They reloaded on defense. They spent big on DJ Reed Jr. and drafted from the Ohio State Buckeyes, Tyleik Williams. So I think huge additions with Aiden Hutchinson coming back, the defense could really improve. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, they still played pretty well until that playoff game. It's amazing. It shows you how deep and just how good of a team they were last year.
Right.
Towards the end of the year, they're still playing really well. Just Jaden Daniels kind of torched them that divisional round game. So yeah, I mean, they will be better than, like I said, they ended the year last year, which should help them finish the year stronger. We don't know if the defensive coordinator adjustment will because I mentioned both coordinators are gone, but more of the focus has been on the offense. Like, okay, is the offense going to regress at all without Ben Johnson? But yeah, not as many people are talked about. Will a new scheme, will it keep the defense at a strong level, or could they see some regression too? I feel more confident in the defense remaining pretty good, assuming no one gets hurt. I love Brian Branch. He's one of my favorite players in the secondary. I do think their corners need to improve a bit. Terry and Arnold, I feel like every time he was on the field, there was a guaranteed flag. And, I mean, you got to get better at that. But, yeah, still an elite defense. And I won't make the prediction yet. I'm still debating on who I think is going to win the North, but they do have the most. I think they still have the most compelling case, despite losing their coordinators. Mostly just because of the. I mean, you can't go 15-2. Going 15-2 and undefeated at home is not due to. It's part of it might be due to the coordinators, but if you're that good,
right,
there's more to it than just the schemes you're running based off your coordinator's play calling. So this team, is still going to be a contender in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think not just losing your offensive and defensive coordinators, but along with them, 5 other assistant coaches in the same offseason went with them. So it's a whole new coaching staff looking like behind Dan Campbell. So it'll be a lot of rah-rah speeches for him to get this team motivated. And like you said, I'm sure they're tired of hearing about their coordinators being gone and that they can't play football now that those guys are gone. Which is why for their over-under, I am going with the over. I'm seeing it at 10.5. I don't know where you saw it at, but you're getting plus money on that at 10.5. I don't think they're going to be 5 games worse than they were last year. So yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with the over here.
So I mentioned that last year they went undefeated on the road. If that happens this year, then you can mark this team as one of the greatest teams of all time. Their road games this year are Baltimore, Cincinnati, Kansas City, the Rams, Philly, Washington, plus your 3 divisional games. So all those teams, I believe, all those teams except Cincinnati made the postseason last year, minus the Bears. But it's still a tough game since it's divisional. So yeah, that's an insane road schedule in my opinion.
Yeah,
like I said, I still think this team is very good. I don't feel confident in this. I do think I'll go the over 2, but I have them at 11 wins. Yeah. I think this is the perfect line because I see them at 10 to 11 wins, just because of the brutality of their schedule, and just there might be some adjusting early in the year based off new scheme, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, we'll see. It's an intriguing team. It'll be an intriguing year for the Lions because they have expectations. Last year was their first year with true expectations, and now they're continuing, and we don't see that very often with the Detroit Lions. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't look like we're going to get 3 teams in the division with double-digit wins. Doesn't seem like it's going to be able to recreate that again. So it could be packed in a little bit more closer race for the division, and the teams more hanging around 500 this year. Moving on to the Green Bay Packers. Last year they ended with an 11-6 record. Really coming into this year, the question is this just it? Is this what Jordan Love is? Are we going to see more? Is this just kind of what he's going to be, and they kind of just have to build around him with some better players, because last year the receiving core wasn't that great. They've never really drafted too many guys, but this year they did go out and get Matthew Golden from Texas in the draft. It was their first wide receiver selected in the first round since Javon Walker in 2002. So it's not a team that goes out for the top talent at wide receiver. But Love's led the Packers to the playoffs in each of his 2 years as a starter, but it just really hasn't materialized from there. It doesn't help that they are playing in one of the toughest divisions in the NFC. It definitely works against them. But to me, this team almost feels like the NFC version of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just from a franchise standpoint, given the last 15 or so years, they've underachieved for many years, but always staying in contention, maybe not right there at that 500 the way Tomlin and the Steelers have done, but it had always kind of felt the same way with the playoff exits. The last Super Bowl was with the best QB in franchise history. For the Packers, it was Aaron Rodgers. For the Steelers, it was Ben Roethlisberger. Since the Super Bowl victory, they're 0-4 in NFC title games. The Steelers are 0-2 in AFC title games. They've won 11 games, good enough to win NFC South, NFC West, and the AFC South last year. But once they get to the playoffs, it just seems like it's no contest.
Yeah, they have one more playoff games than the Steelers. Steelers are on a really long playoff drought. But yeah, that is a fair comparison, like I said, historically. Yeah, because, I mean, the Rodgers years led to many disappointing endings.
Yeah.
Most of those teams are super fun to watch. So yeah, starting with Jordan Love, the question is he a top tier quarterback, or is he just a beneficiary of a really good offensive system input by Matt LeFleur? So you mentioned the Matthew Golden draft pick. I don't view him as like a Jamar Chase coming out of the draft, meaning that he's not an immediate wide receiver one. He could be in a few years. I'm not questioning that. I'm just talking about this first year. So, well, going in like last year, I feel like the Packers had like 4 wide receiver twos on their team. Now I think they have 5 wide receiver twos, because I don't think Matthew Golden's like a bona fide star right out of the gate. So yeah, it's very. I do think that's helpful for a guy like Love, who I don't believe is top tier, but is pretty good. But is it enough to contend in the NFC North? Last year, yeah, they ran into the Eagles in the wild card match. That was a tough matchup, so I don't really criticize them too much for losing that compared to the other two teams in their division who lost in the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, will Jordan Love need to step up, or are they just kind of content with how they run things and they just kind of hope that other teams get hurt or slip up and they can move on up, which is possible? Last year, they relied a lot on Josh Jacobs because Jordan Love was he threw the Packers threw the third least amount of passes. So the bottom 3 in the amount of passes thrown. And I mean, Josh Jacobs had a really good year last year, especially towards the end of the year. They relied a lot on him, and that worked out well as they were able to go 11-6. 11-6, but 1-5 against the division. That's kind of interesting and glaring, you could say. Got swept by both the Lions and the Vikings. I think that final Bears game wasn't too meaningful, but still, yeah, you got clearly the third best team in the division last year.
Right, and the schedule outside of the division this year is much more difficult than it was for them last year. Yeah,
last year they played the AFC South, and not many impressive victories. They beat Houston in a good game, but other than that, yeah, it's 3 struggling teams. Their defense is also similar to their receivers, where I don't see a weakness on their defense, but I don't think they're great at anything on defense either. I think they're good, not great at everything on defense. Yeah. Xavier McKinney had a great year last year at 8 interceptions. I really like Quay Walker as a linebacker. Their pass rush is maybe you could say that's the iffiest part, but I do think Lucas Van Ness could step up and be productive. I know you take anything you hear from training camp with a grain of salt, but they say he's looked good in training camp. So Maybe that will translate. Who knows? Oftentimes it does. Oftentimes it does, and oftentimes it doesn't. So, but yeah, if they can get more out of their pass rush, I think this defense is really good, and there's no glaring weakness, which complements their offense well. So, yeah, they also have a pretty compelling case to win this division. They have struggled against the Dan Campbell led Lions these last few years, not just last year, but even the years before that. Excuse me, they've kind of struggled against them. So they'll have to clear that hump, which is kind of ironic because Green Bay dominated Detroit in the Rodgers era. But yeah, we'll see what this Green Bay team this year.
Yeah, Green Bay, we're used to seeing them winning Super Bowls. You know, they're one of the most historic franchises in this league, and that's why I like comparing them to the Steelers, especially given the recent history with them. I think one of the best bets that you could have had last year in any given game with the Packers was Jordan Love over under on interceptions. Just like for him to throw an interception, that was one of the best bets you could have in any game last year with the Packers, and I took that bet plenty of times.
Yeah, he had multiple. He had multiple TD, multiple interception games, like some of those crazy stat lines, which are fun to look at and dissect after a game. But it can be frustrating as a Packers fan because he'll show signs of looking really well, and then he'll show signs of throwing the dumbest interceptions. I'm thinking back on that Rams one. Was that last year where he just threw it? He was going to take a safety, and he just chucked it up and came out to be a pick six.
Yeah, Jordan Love might be the Jordan Spieth of the NFL.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
It's all birdies and bogeys. There's no pars. There's nothing in between. I'm seeing their line at 9.5. I'm inclined to go under here. What are you feeling?
This is the most confident over I have. Yeah,
really.
I think they're going to be an 11-12 win team this year. I think things will just I think they're due. They haven't won the division in a couple of years. I just think they're due to win it again, and then probably get disappointed in the playoffs again. But there's really just not many weaknesses with this team. Strengths, there are very few, but weaknesses, hardly any. And I think that can serve well when there's questions amongst the other three teams about how good they'll be this year.
Right. It does feel like the other teams in the division, like I said, there's a lot of change in the division, but the one constant feels like the Packers. Not too much is different from year over year with this team, but I'm just thinking if they win 11-6 last year with the schedule the way it is this year, and I even think the Vikings maybe even be better just from a team standpoint, maybe not get to the record that they got to last year. I just think the division's tough. Their schedule's tough. It's going to be a couple less wins for them. So I'm going under on the 9.5, but that's what we can disagree here. Let's finish things up with the Minnesota Vikings. So last year, as I mentioned, they had a pretty remarkable year, going 14-3. Sam Darnold, really just changed our view on him for most of this year. And then those last two games of the year, it was like, okay, that's the Sam Darnold we know. He turned into a pumpkin, and the rest is history for the Vikings season. So he might have shown his true colors in those last two games, but this is a really great roster under a really good coach who won Coach of the Year in Kevin O'Connell. And this offseason, they've spent over $300 million in free agency to reshape both of the offensive lines. I think, or both of the lines, both defensive and offensive. Right guard Will Freeze, $88 million. They went out and got center Ryan Kelly, defensive tackles Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, who are going to be, really good complements to their edge rushers Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard. So I really like the way this defense is looking, especially when you have Brian Flores calling plays for this defense, who's one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. But the big story here is there's a lot of pressure on JJ McCarthy, which is crazy because he hasn't played a regular season snap for this team. And it just feels like he's one of those quarterbacks that has the most pressure coming into this season. because of what they did with Sam Darnold last year. And if Kevin O'Connell's not able to recreate that with McCarthy, there's going to be real big questions with this team.
Yeah, the Vikings only lost to 2 teams last year. They lost to Detroit twice, and they lost to the Rams twice, but they beat everybody else. So, and they finished second in their division, even though they went 14-3, which we talked about before. Sparked the debate: do they deserve home field advantage? And I will always say no. Winning your division means something, and when they got destroyed by the Rams in the playoffs, that told me they did not deserve.
I supported your argument right there.
Yeah, a home field advantage. If it was close and they lost, you could then make an argument because, if they would have had home field advantage, they probably could have beat the Rams, but they got destroyed. And yeah. So, this is a weird. I've been trying to think of a comparison for this team. They're definitely the biggest. I feel like they're the biggest unknown in the league. Like they could be a sleeping giant that not enough people are talking about because they went 14-3, or they could regress heavily and be around 500, and everyone just kind of forgets about them. I'm thinking this isn't there's some things that are off about this comparison, but there's some things that are true. Like go back to like the 2012 Vikings where Christian Ponder was their quarterback. Not a great quarterback, but you had Adrian Peterson, and that was his 2,000-yard rushing season, and you had a solid defense, and you were able to make the playoffs. I'm not saying JJ McCarthy's Christian Ponder bad, or he will be Christian Ponder bad, but if he is, you have a guy like Justin Jefferson, not all-world talent. You have an outstanding defense. This could still be a playoff team, even if McCarthy struggles. But everything is set up for McCarthy to succeed. I mean, you got, like we said, got good defense, got Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison will be good when he comes back from his 3-game suspension. Their tight end, why am I blanking on his name?
Hawkinson,
TJ Hawkinson. Yeah, blanked on his name real quick, but yeah, he great tight end. Aaron Jones is getting old, but he's still a solid running back, and they upgraded the offensive line. So, yeah, it's all there for McCarthy to succeed. I don't think I think for me, if we're being realistic, his expectations for this year is don't sink the ship. Just level it. Just keep it level. You don't have to do anything fancy. On paper, we are very good. So if other people struggle, it's not your fault. You just keep it afloat, and then we'll make changes in the offseason to help you out if the 14-3 year was a fluke. And yeah, so like I said, this team's very unknown. I don't think there's a scenario, barring lots of injuries, where they'll be really bad. But this team could very easily be 500, or could very easily contend in the NFC.
Yeah,
you just don't know.
Yeah, and to me, it's like, does McCarthy really even have to be that good? Like, he's got so much talent around him. Just throw it up to Justin Jefferson, let him go get it. He was the 10th overall pick in last year's draft. He did miss his whole rookie season, as I mentioned, with that torn meniscus that he suffered in a preseason opener. It did end up requiring 2 surgeries. So it'll be interesting to see how he is mobility-wise coming into this year. In college, he was in one of those old 60s style NFL offenses under Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. He won a natty. He also went 27-1 as the quarterback at Michigan. Can he air it out in O'Connell's offense? O'Connell, as we know, he's a pass first kind of guy to set up the run. And that's why I'm wondering. That's the questions around him, is that he was in this Michigan offense that didn't require him to do too much. It was a very ground and pound, get small chunks of yards, and it was just a bruiser of a team that ended up winning the national championship. The one thing I'll say is that there are a lot of good stories, good words out there for him. Watch out if he does well with this team and this becomes a playoff team like I think they will be, and if they win the division, he could be a front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year. because that's what he's eligible for this season.
They do that for NFL too, just like the NBA. I didn't know that. I didn't know they did that.
Yeah. So it just
Yeah,
when we're thinking about offensive rookie of the year, we're thinking about like, Travis Hunter or Cam Ward or Ashton Genty. This guy is in the mix, and he could very well take that home at the end of this year. Obviously, like you said, Jordan Addison is suspended for the first 3 games, so it'll be interesting to see how JJ will handle not having one of those weapons and having a lot of that attention go to Jefferson, and how they have to scheme to get him open or get other guys open with that. Anything else on the Vikings?
just going over their defense. There were some aspects of their defense that were elite last year, and some that were not good at all, and it wasn't talked about enough. But led the league in turnovers, or tied Pittsburgh for most turnovers with 33. Very impressive. Van Ginkel and Jonathan Greenard, I talked about earlier, very good at getting to the quarterback. Their secondary, though, did give up the 5th most passing yards in the league, and they really didn't do anything to address it very much. They lost Cam Bynum, I know, this offseason. They did re-sign Byron Murphy Jr., but, I mean, other than that, they didn't do anything, and Harrison Smith is 36 now. So if that doesn't improve, that could be their Achilles heel this year on defense. And but like you said, Brian Flores runs some of the most exotic defenses you'll see. It's kind of fun to watch. If you just watch focus on the defense, don't even watch the offense they're playing. Just look how he's scheming. It's kind of fun to watch. Most entertaining team to watch do that. So they'll probably figure it out, but that is something to keep an eye on going this year.
Yeah. Looking at their line, seeing another 9.5 here. I'm going over on this at plus 120, and I'll just go ahead and say what I think, how I think this division is going to play out. I think the Vikings do win the division. I think this team can be better without Darnold. I think get in some new blood, someone who I think is wanting to prove himself and prove the doubters from at his time at Michigan being just this handed off to the running back kind of guy. And I think he has a really good chance of winning the Offensive Rookie of the Year. So I'm going Vikings to win the division, followed by the Lions, Packers, and Bears.
So I was not high on JJ McCarthy coming out of Michigan. I'm still not high on JJ McCarthy now, but this team will still win 9 games, so I will go with the over. Very rare. Yeah, this will not be I don't think this will be a 3 teams out of this division will make the playoffs again. It'll be close though, because like I have the Bears as the worst team, and I have them winning 8 games. We'll talk about the NFC South and NFC West coming up, and that kind of explains why these 4 teams are going to be still have so many wins, even though they have a tough division to play in, because those divisions are a little iffy. I'll just put it lightly. So yeah, like I said, I have the Packers winning the division. I just think they're overdue. They'll be close. It'll be Green Bay, Detroit, Minnesota, and then Chicago. Very close standings. Love me some NFC North snow games, even dome games. Those are fun to watch. Unfortunately, I don't like this very much, but the Green Bay Chicago series, they play each other twice in the span of 13 days. Kind of wish it was spread out a little more. Those are in December though, so hopefully they're cold and muddy and stuff. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up our NFC North discussion. I will say, I don't know if you mentioned, but last I saw, Lions are plus 155, Packers plus 240, Vikings plus 300, and Bears plus 550. That kind of goes with what we said earlier, where there is a realistic shot for every team to win this division. Just some have a more realistic shot than others.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating division. It could go. It might be one of the harder divisions to predict coming into this new season. Do we have any fantasy talk this week?
Some. This is kind of a joke, but kind of not. This is just for your mental health. I don't know if you like picking Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round just because how infuriating it is that he gets these runs and then they hand it off to David Montgomery once they're at the goal line and he gets the touchdown.
Right.
Gibbs should be running back one, I feel like, but because they, for some reason, have to keep giving the ball to Montgomery as well.
Very much an Ohio State Quinshon Judkins, Trevion Henderson type deal there.
That's a good comparison, yes. Obviously, Gibbs and Justin Jefferson are your first-round picks. I was half joking. You just might be a little frustrated watching Gibbs because he'll still get you lots of points.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, Montgomery does too. I was looking at this earlier. He only got less than 12 points only once last year.
Wow.
Just shows you, he pretty reliable. Not a very high ceiling, but a very high floor. So if that trend continues, I mean, I would not hesitate drafting him. He'd be perfect if you have a guy go down with an injury or something. But I like DeAndre Swift this year. I think with Ben Johnson as a coach, offensive-minded coach, I think that opens up DeAndre Swift a little more. I'm still seeing like him projected where he was last year, like 57th overall. I think he'll be better. He's been a really consistent running back, 15 to 20, that range. I think he'll be better this year. I don't trust any Packers players fantasy-wise other than Josh Jacobs because he's the lead back, but any of their receivers I don't trust very much. Jaden Reed's injured apparently right now. We don't know if he'll be back for week one or not. I guess Matthew Golden has potential, but like I said, I don't trust any of them at the moment. Like I said, they're all wide receiver twos basically. So one of them might go off for 30 fantasy points one week, and then the next few weeks they only average 5. So it's very iffy. My sleeper is Jalen Naylor. That he will be the Vikings wide receiver 2 with Addison out. And we know, like you said, O'Connell likes to throw the ball. So Naylor is not getting that much hype right now. But if you want a guy towards the end of the draft who you could possibly play with Jordan Addison out those first 3 games due to his suspension, I like Jalen Naylor. Very, very quickly with this, I don't think any of the quarterbacks are starter worthy. Goff was last year, but we mentioned earlier we think he'll regress some statistically with a new offensive scheme. Yeah. Caleb Williams, I know he could improve, like he could show really good flashes until a Chicago Bears quarterback shows he can be like a dynamic fantasy guy. I'll just never believe it. And then Jordan Love and JJ McCarthy. McCarthy, you never know with Justin Jefferson as his receiver 1. I mean, he could stack up points just by throwing it to him. But I would maybe take a flyer on him. But Jordan Love, him and CJ Stroud are basically on the same level as good quarterbacks, but really not good fantasy. They don't really rush very much. You just kind of have to rely on them throwing a lot of touchdowns.
All right. Well, that's a little bit of a fantasy football focus from Logan here. Before we move on and finish things off with a little college football, if you're still listening, make sure if you're listening on YouTube that you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel at KL Sports Huddle. If you've made it this far and you're waiting to listen about Big Ten football, you might as well like it. If you're listening on Spotify, go ahead, follow us, give us a rating and a review. Appreciate it. We're also on Instagram at Huddle KL Sports. You can see some of our content in short snippets, as well as any breaking news in the sports world on our stories. Big Ten football. We're coinciding this with the NFC North because it just fits. Last season, obviously, Oregon and a bunch of other Pac-12 teams made their way into the Big Ten, and Oregon took the crown this past season. But then they ran into, as one of my favorite sports announcers, Joe Klatt says, the Death Star supernova that was the Ohio State Buckeyes. And in the playoff, it was a beatdown. This season, it looks to be like Penn State's getting a lot of the attention right now because they're bringing everybody back. It's kind of been that that pattern the past few years with Big Ten teams that have won the national championship. It was the same with Michigan 2 years ago. They brought a lot of their pieces back, and they won the Natty. Ohio State, they were able to get NIL deals for a lot of their current players to keep them in college, keep a lot of that experience on the field, and they win a national championship. It kind of feels the same way with Penn State, bringing a lot of players back. They're bringing their quarterback Drew Aller back, and the biggest pickup I think was defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles, who was the former Ohio State defensive coordinator. So Penn State's getting a lot of the attention right now as maybe the best team in the country. What do you feel like with them, and what do you think about the Big Ten as a whole?
So, I mean, they have been known disappointments over several years. Penn State has. They did make it to the, what do you call it? Do you call it Final Four now? Now it's a playoff. I don't even know, but
semifinals.
Semifinals, yeah, they did. They did make it that far, but they beat they beat SMU in that first game, and then I can't remember who they. Mine's blanking.
It was Notre Dame that they lost to.
Yeah, they lost to Notre Dame. Yeah. So, rightfully so. I think rightfully so. I mean, the early AP poll came out today. They're number 2, and Ohio State's 3. I think Oregon's 7, I believe. But none of these rankings matter until the games are played, in my opinion. That's why I love college football, but I rarely ever think about it or care about it in the off season. It's just because, with rankings, it just once the games start, that's when things, you kind of forget who left and who came in, who's coming in. A little different now with the transfer portal. You do pay a little more attention to that, but I just wait till the games are played. And but I do think it's true. Ohio State's the defending champions, but with Penn State retaining a lot of their key figures, I think they probably deserve the number 2 spot over Ohio State. But we'll just wait till the games are played to declare who's actually better.
Yeah, and I think one team that is, for me, one to really watch for this season is Illinois, because they could end up being the Indiana of last year. Indiana had a pretty favorable schedule. Illinois has a favorable schedule. They don't have to play Oregon, Penn State, or Michigan coming into this year, and their game against Ohio State is at home. So they're set up pretty well for a really good season. They're bringing back a lot of their O-line. They're bringing back Luke Altmaier at QB. So I think this could be a really fun year for Illinois, who had a pretty good season last year. They were just in a tough conference here in the Big Ten that had a lot of heavy hitters at the top. What are maybe some of
Indiana's you just mentioned, they're very intriguing just because was last year a fluke, or will this be things to come? I mean, you got to love the transfer quarterback they got, Fernando Mendoza from Cal.
Yeah.
I like that's what Kurt Cignetti, their coach, is looking for. He got Curtis Rourke the year before, experienced guy. Right. You're not taking a project, you're taking an experienced guy to come in and hopefully keep this team. I guess now it's keep this team strong. But for Rourke, it was let's go to new levels, bring this team to new levels. So I love that transfer. But yeah, they're a wild card because while last year was a fantastic season, no doubt about it, it was laid out beautifully for them. Like, I mean, and they deserved it. They deserved it after years in the Big Ten East when that was so unfairly divided. But yeah, it was laid out beautifully for them, where they're only tough. Like, it was beautiful to go 11-1 because they only played 4 road games. One of them was at Ohio State, so that was their guaranteed loss. But they played none of the middle of the pack teams on the road. They avoided like Oregon, Penn State. Avoided Oregon and Penn State. Like, they never had to go to Iowa or Minnesota, or like the middle of the road teams. I feel like that would have been a great test to go to middle pack teams and beat them on the road. They will have to do that this year. this year. They do avoid Ohio State, but they do have to go to Oregon. That's a tough game, and Penn State and Iowa. That Iowa game is going to be interesting. But you mentioned Illinois. That September 20th, Week 4 game, Illinois at Indiana. That's one of the best games in the Big Ten this year. I feel like that could set the stage that could set the direction for both teams depending on the outcome of that game.
Yeah, you mentioned Iowa. They get both Oregon and Penn State at home, and Kinnick is a really tough place to play in. Not easy for any team. I think they will get one of those. One of those two teams are gonna fall at Iowa. Some of the best games I'm seeing on the slate for the Big Ten. A couple of early non-conference games. Obviously, the Texas at Ohio State game in the non-conference is
Who cares about that?
An
one
incredible...
versus. I guess that is one downside of the AP poll. It's not going to be 1 versus 2. It'll be 1 versus 3.
Yeah, but we're going to get to see Arch Manning and the Texas Longhorns take on the defending champs and the Ohio State Buckeyes. So that'll be a really fun game to get the season going. Michigan at Oklahoma is another one. Kind of see Bryce Underwood if he's going to end up taking that starting job. It's not a done deal yet, but he has been getting a lot of the snaps since the other quarterback's been down with an injury. And that he's probably one of the biggest, most highly touted freshmen coming into this season, especially for this conference. So to see him go on the road at Oklahoma, that'll be a fun one to watch. Looking down the list, you mentioned the Illinois at Indiana game, Oregon at Penn State. That's a huge one on September 27th.
There's 3 really good games on that day. Oregon at Penn State's the best, but I like USC at Illinois. We're kind of waiting for USC to take that jump, and I think their schedule is pretty favorable up to that point. So that could be, if Illinois is able to get by Indiana, that's a big if. That could be a really good game too. And then Indiana at Iowa, I mentioned that game earlier, but that should also be a fantastic game, assuming both teams are at the level that they are currently ranked.
Yeah. And then we got Michigan at USC on October 11th. And by that point, Michigan will have already played at Oklahoma and Nebraska. They could be 5-0 and in the top 10, or they could be 3-2 and basically flailing and it'd be another season, much like last year. But USC will have just visited Illinois and could be flailing themselves. In this, we don't know what it's going to be like for USC. Both those teams are a bit wild card. Obviously, November 1st, Penn State at Ohio State is always a good one. Ohio State usually prevails because it's just one of those, really the one game during the regular season that Franklin can't get for his squad.
I don't think he ever
will. And then another Penn State one, Indiana at Penn State, November 8th. Whether Penn State's coming off a win or a loss in Columbus, they will desperately need to move on and avoid a hangover from that game because IU's going to be coming to town.
They will, but Indiana's going to have to show something that they've never done before, and that's go into a hostile environment and look like they did at home last year, which they got off to a decent start against Ohio State last year, but then Ohio State kind of blew the doors open, and then Notre Dame, that was pretty ugly too. So, yeah, on paper it should be a good game. But I think it's going to depend on what happens in that week before with Penn State, Ohio State.
Yep.
And then Ohio State, Michigan's obviously the other big one.
Well, yeah, obviously we'll end with that one. Yeah. And even with the 12-team college football playoff format, it's still the biggest rivalry, and it can even now if you lose it, obviously we saw what Ohio State was able to do coming off a loss in that game and winning the championship, but it's always going to be the biggest game. It's the game, obviously. So a fun one to always end the season with for the Big Ten. Any last thoughts on the Big Ten as we head into the 2025 season?
Not really. I haven't mentioned Nico, whatever his last name is. How do you say that?
Iamaleava.
Yeah. UCLA could make some noise. I'm not going to say they're going to contend, but that is an interesting pickup. If he displays the talent that he did at Tennessee at UCLA, they will be a tough out. I have Purdue versus Rutgers in the championship. What about you?
I think,
It's
I think
going
it'll
to
be Penn State and either Ohio State or Oregon. It's going to be one of those three. I feel like with this run with these coaches and these programs, it's just going to be like that for the next few years, even decade at least. So
I do agree, though, that Illinois has a chance due to their schedule.
Yeah.
Their difference between them and Indiana last year was that Illinois actually is ranked high. Indiana kind of came out of nowhere. But you're like, schedule does matter if you're going to win the title, and Illinois does have a favorable schedule.
All right, that will wrap things up here at the K&L Sports Huddle. We'll be back next week with the NFC South Division preview as well as an SEC preview. We're just going to coincide South with South there, and get as we get just closer and closer to the NFL regular season and college football regular season. Football's right around the corner, guys. So stay with us with these previews, and we'll be back next week. I'm Cage Kiplinger. That's Logan Hubert. We'll see y'all.